Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks very much for coming so early today. My name's Simon Nelson, and I'm delighted to be at my very first NATPE, my very first time in Miami as well, and to have the honour of speaking here this morning. Up until about 3 weeks ago, I was in charge of digital and new media for BBC Television, and I've just left after 14 years in that august institution. During which time I was at the heart of the development of its website, and I oversaw the digital migration of first its radio and then its TV services and content. And my plan's to talk for the next 20 minutes or so and to share with you some of the insights that we gained at the BBC during that time. Now, for those of you who don't know the BBC and how it operates in the UK, it runs multiple TV channels, radio stations and websites, which are entirely funded by a license fee which is charged to every household that owns a TV set. There are no ads on any channels or any websites in the UK. In fact, it's the best business model going, because if people don't pay for you, they go to jail. Now, this level of guaranteed funding should and often has enabled the BBC to invest more in R&D to spot and exploit the next big things. But of course, being early doesn't always mean being the best. This is a clip I'm about to show you of the very first time a website was mentioned on air on our children's channel in about 96, 97. And just check out the way we used to communicate.
With Blue Peter, amongst other top things, at 5:10. Now, it's a good day, isn't it, tomorrow? Now, I think my voice can just stand up to this. It's going, but there's only about a couple of minutes left, so I'll get on with this bit now. Because thank you, Anarat, thank you. Loads and loads and loads of you email us and write to us at Children's BBC every day, wanting general information about presenters and competitions and programmes and the like. Well, we now have a World Wide Web page on the internet. So you can access the information yourself if you can get onto the World Wide Web, okay? And if you can, this is our address. I hope you've got a pen and paper ready, because as you can see, it's not particularly short. First of all, to get through to the BBC itself, okay, so get through those walls, you need to type in this first line, http://www.bbcnc.org.uk. Are you lost? I thought you were. So that, basically, the first line gets you through to the BBC.
He goes on. We'll spare him. I want to talk today about some of the strategic foundations that we've put in place across the BBC television services that have enabled all sorts of innovation. But I want to talk about that balance between laying those big foundation projects and then being able to innovate on top of them. And the first one that I want to talk about is based around what I regard as the bedrock of any television organisation. It's programmes. Now, this may seem to be an uncontroversial statement, particularly to a room full of TV execs, but believe me, over the years, it's been fiercely debated in the BBC and elsewhere between technology, digital and TV teams, and multiple new media gurus have dismissed television programmes as old media, old hat, and the web equivalent of the horseless carriage. And that may explain why, when I arrived 4 years ago in BBC TV, despite years of investment in websites, when I did a search for one of our most popular programmes, Friday Night with Jonathan Ross, I did get a result for the BBC, albeit in third place, below TV.com and Wikipedia. But when I clicked on it, I got an error page, because that page had existed in our listings area right up until the moment that we broadcast the programme. And then we deleted it, because that was the broadcast mentality that said programmes just go out on telly. And in fact, in 2007, only 20% of our programmes had any presence on the web, and many were poor quality, expensive and badly architected. And as a result, most of BBC TV wasn't even findable in Google. Now, you can debate all you want about whether the web's going to swallow up the whole of television, if on-demand's going to destroy live viewing, none of which I subscribe to, incidentally. But what I think is certain is that the prime way that audiences of the future will discover, recommend, and choose what they're going to watch is going to be internet-driven. And if you want to avoid your program being invisible and not talked about, you need a permanent, globally accessible, and unique page which can be indexed by all the search engines and can form a sort of honeypot around which search and social web activity can swarm. So we started development of a system to deliver an automated website for every program we make and every episode of every program we make across TV and radio, which could house our archives and be handed over to TV and radio production teams so that they could update the pages and own them. Now, the first pages were, to say the least, a little bare, and this perhaps doesn't quite do justice to our flagship Saturday night sci-fi program, Doctor Who. But over time, we improved them, we evolved them, and we added new features. And they've become the foundations upon which all of our program makers can now build, at marginal additional cost, a powerful web presence for any program and every episode of every program. This site for Mad Men is a very minimal enhancement of that basic automated site. It'll have taken just an hour or so to put together and maybe cost a few $100s. But it contains a video clip, which is rights cleared, so there's always some AV available, even when it's not in its on-demand window. A basic synopsis, cast and crew information, and probably the most basic information that audiences will want about this episode. What was the music that was played in it? And in order to take that interest further, we developed another foundation, another platform, which is a database of all the music and all the artists played on our radio and TV shows, which now underpins every program we make and broadcast. These program pages were also the bedrock of our social media strategy. We developed a product that tracked across Twitter, Facebook, and various blogging platforms where people were linking to and talking about our programs, which would have been impossible without this program's platform. And as long as they adhered to certain moderation guidelines, we linked to them. And we automatically generated what we called buzz pages, which tracked which programs and episodes were being most talked about on the web, and we rewarded these most passionate of our fans with links back from the BBC. Something what we could then see delights them. In the UK alone, these pages are now used by nearly 1.5 people a week, 1.5 million people a week even, and that's growing. And it ensures that pretty much every one of our program sites, particularly if you're searching in the UK, now comes top in Google and other search engines. And when you click on it, there's something there. A record of that show, the chance to sample a few bits of it, and some onward links to other material you might find of interest. Now that means that everything, every program has something. And believe me, that took away a whole lot of heat from the program making teams and the commissioners in the BBC. But it also meant we could focus our investment where we wanted to go bigger around certain shows on the things that would really innovate and really use the medium to its full potential, because we'd done all the basics. And we've won just about every award there is for these 360-degree enhancements: Emmys, Webbies, Rockies, Prix Italia, the Rose d'Or. But I'm just going to single out one that I'm very proud of in that period. And that's something called Brain Test Britain, which was a prime-time BBC One, one-off special driven off the back of a mass participation platform that my team had built. It enables program makers to use the web to generate scientific experiments which then map to the mass audiences that the BBC is able to generate through TV. So you can get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to take part in experiments which you were never able to do before. And we wanted to use this to test whether brain training games, you know, those things on DSs and so on, whether they really work, because no one had ever done a scientific study into that. So we developed a whole load of games, working with scientists, and hundreds of thousands of people played these games. And critically, tens of thousands played every day for 6 weeks, which was the kind of scientific sample we needed. And once we'd crunched all the results, we not only created a fascinating TV show out of it, generated from the mass participation of the audience, but we were published in the scientific journal Nature. And the answer, does brain training work? Well, I'm afraid you need to keep drinking the green tea. So in summary, a web proposition that uses TV to generate mass audiences who then participate and play along in a scientific experiment. All built on this foundation technology. It's now been rolled out to do a whole load of other surveys into stress, personality types, social class and the like. Now, organising all of our programme information in this way also provided the foundations for the iPlayer, which is the BBC's hugely successful on-demand player, which was launched in December 2007. And by October 2010, nearly 140 million programmes a month were being viewed in the UK alone. Now, that's a big number, but I think it's always important to retain a sense of perspective, because that number still represented less than 1% of the BBC's overall TV viewing. I recently heard Google boasting about the fact that in the UK, YouTube now accounts for 1 billion minutes a month of viewing, which sounds absolutely amazing until you do the math and work out that that's equivalent to about 0.25% of overall TV viewing in the UK. Because the arrival of on-demand is a fundamental change to the broadcasting industry. But the arrival of the new doesn't necessarily mean the death of the old. And this tendency to overestimate the short-term impact of technology was also shown in the otherwise excellent first designs of the iPlayer. Because what's missing from this screen? Well, what about TV channels? The brands and their schedules that audiences deal with day in and day out in normal life. There was this assumption that on-demand threw out all the old rules about TV, and that audiences would find and choose what to watch using search, A to Z listings, recommendations, etc., and subject-based categories. Channels, like programmes, were dead, the old media world trying to survive in the new. Now, we managed to get some real estate for our brands and their schedules on the next iteration of the iPlayer. And many of us were not surprised by the results of some research we then did to find out how people found what to watch in the iPlayer. 37% of them went straight to the programme if it appeared in the promotional carousel. But over a quarter were navigating using this channels and schedules area on the iPlayer homepage. Only 8% were using search. When there's vast choice, I think audiences more than ever need brands they can fall back on to guide and inspire and endorse the content they're going to watch. And though I think there could still be more prominence in the latest designs, we at last managed to get these channel brands onto the iPlayer homepage. I don't believe channels are dead. They need to evolve, but they remain for me the primary means by which audiences navigate and find guidance and recommendation, even in on-demand. And I don't believe that at the BBC or elsewhere we've yet done enough to evolve some of our channels into truly cross-platform, interactive brands. And I think it's a major opportunity for someone out there. My third area where we've laid these long-term foundations for BBC television is by supporting the subjects and topics that it covers and has covered year in and year out. Because people don't just use the web to search for our programs, much though we'd like to think it. They search for information and topics of interest to them as well. And our programs can be a wonderful spark to inspire that onward journey, as well as a stopping point on the way to satisfy their curiosity. Now take this example. This is Google Trends, and it allows you to see the search patterns for a particular keyword over time and within given territories. And this is a picture for the word Pompeii. And you'll see a couple of peaks and then a noticeable leap on May the 12th. Now, Google knew what caused two of the earlier peaks: Roman Polanski's exit from the film Pompeii, new archaeological finds. But it didn't know what was happening on May the 12th. It was a broadcast of a single Doctor Who programme, The Fires of Pompeii. And like thousands of others, as soon as I'd finished watching the episode with my family, I asked my kids what they knew about Pompeii. When the depressing answer was absolutely nothing, like any good middle-class parent, I gathered them at my knee and we went to the web. And what we had there from the Beeb was a great programme site, but nothing that fed that interest and took them further, even links elsewhere on the BBC where there was loads of great content. So we decided we needed a system that could aggregate the best information and content the BBC had around certain topics and subjects and do it automatically, because otherwise it'd just be too time-consuming. And we could then map it to the best of the rest of the web to create powerful destination pages that would index beautifully in search engines. And we started with animals. And using a process we called data modeling, we empowered some of our open web geniuses to mine our archives and use the latest sophisticated semantic web techniques to identify and tag our best content related to polar bears, lions, robins, in order to create single canonical pages which will always showcase the best of the BBC, partnered and interconnected with the best of the rest of the web. And these pages are already very prominent in Google, meaning that we and our kids are more likely to stumble across high-quality audio, visual content when searching for the information on these subjects. And then we move from animals to dinosaurs and prehistoric life, and to planets, and across the whole universe into other areas of scientific interest. It's an approach that the BBC could stretch across history and into all sorts of other areas of knowledge. And not just in the formal higher-end knowledge areas, but also in popular factual areas, where we use this data modeling technique to overhaul all of our food sites and the infrastructure underpinning them, creating unique pages and locations for all of our recipes, our chefs, all of the ingredients going into those recipes, and tying it all back to the bedrock, those programs. And in the process, we created a rich, dynamic, interconnected food proposition which goes from strength to strength. We analyze and respond to user search analytics to prioritize where we're going to invest, what we're going to promote. So pushing pancakes in February and pushing pumpkin soup in October. Sounds obvious, but a real focus on this search engine optimization and user analytics actually was quite alien within the BBC culture, but is probably essential for any successful web product. And this relaunch has so far seen a huge uplift for an area that appeared to have slipped into irrevocable decline. They're just UK figures again. Finally, in this section, I think our mobile activities, even at the BBC, have been actually quite poor. And I think few in the TV area have actually cracked mobile. But this was one major success story, and a subject area food, where the commercial opportunities on web, on mobile, and actually on the smart TVs that Intel were talking about are obvious and potentially huge. Finally, because we've laid all these foundations across all of our output, we've standardized our approach to programs, to clips, to on-demand, to recipes, to music, to wildlife, etc., we've been able to free up investment to focus on a few innovation projects of real scale and ambition, to experiment with new forms of content that properly use the participative potential of the web, not just trying to pump video out over the internet. We'd made many web original dramas, comedies, etc., that had been critically acclaimed, but we just didn't get the mass audiences that would make the TV world sit up, mainly because they weren't attached to any of the brands or the channels that the audience was familiar with. So when we wanted to experiment with the world of games, we decided to put our money where our mouth is and use our biggest brand of all, Doctor Who.
The Doctor in a new dimension. You take control in Doctor Who The Adventure Games. Run. Download now at bbc.co.uk/Doctor Who.
So we created 4 downloadable online games and for PC and Mac. And bringing together the worlds of games and TV, we created huge excitement and creativity on both sides, because the Doctor Who team felt liberated from the traditional constraints of a TV episode and were free to take the story in entirely new directions. They were free to blow up Trafalgar Square, take the Doctor to entirely new planets, take him to the Arctic, and build whole episodes underwater. The games company was thrilled to gain access to the writers, the storylines, the actors of a television brand that many of them had grown up with. And over 2 million games have so far been downloaded in the UK alone. So, I've given a glimpse of some of the things we were able to achieve in the BBC, backed by a unique business model of guaranteed funding and a public service remit. So why have I left what's been described to me as the best content job in new media, and what's next for me? Well, 14 years is a long time in any organisation, and I reckon that doing new media jobs in traditional businesses, it's like dog years, sort of 7 for each year you do. So I think I've earned my public service spurs. And I now want to test some of these things I've learned in the models we've developed at the BBC in the commercial media marketplace. But wherever I go in the media industry, I think many of the principles I've spoken about today are going to remain true for any modern media organisation, trying to make sense of the digital world and trying to make money within it. Thanks very much for your time this morning. As if anyone wants. I think I've clearly answered any questions that were left in anyone's head about the digital future, except this guy's. Sorry. Do we have a microphone? Sorry, there's a guy down at the front here. I think we probably do need the mic in this noise. But So the reference was to the BBC, like many other organisations, is facing quite significant budget cuts. And it just announced, actually, a scaling back of its investment in web activities, which, again, is another reason why I've decided it's time to move on. Now, what's happened with the BBC is it's a major intervention in a commercial marketplace. It's £3 billion worth of public intervention, basically, and it's come under severe pressure. Political pressure from a new Conservative government and commercial pressure from competitors who want to see its wings clipped. And basically it's said that there'll be a 25% reduction in budgets for the website. Now, strategically, I've got to say, I'm not entirely sure that's the right thing for an organisation like the BBC, but it was under a lot of pressure. But what I will say is that the kind of work we've done here to lay these strategic foundations actually reduce a huge amount of cost that was previously there in customising every programme site, every recipe, every cookery site, etc. So actually, they can still do it. And I think in terms of the innovation, my message to the teams I've left behind and so on has been, rather than innovating on the margins of the TV activities, you've now got to get right into the heart of every big TV production and stop worrying about a few tens of million on the side and start dealing with the 3 billion and making all of that work in a cross-platform, transmedia way. Okay, so if there's no more questions, then thanks again, and I'll be seeing you around the conference. Thank you.